Free buses for the elderly and school children face the axe to plug a £450 million funding gap. We're going to read into this exclusive from the iPaper, you guys. Let's go. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. This is Reganelite here with an exclusive from the iPaper with the headline that free buses for the elderly and school children faces the axe to plug the £450 million funding gap. While the councils are obligated to offer pensioners free bus travel most of the time, free peak travel, community transport and school children all face cuts. Guys, while you're here, make sure you hit that like button and share across social media so others are notified of this video. This is, while this isn't definitely going to happen, this is something that could be on the cards, as we know that councils are really struggling, and we know that they'd be given more carte blanche to kind of do a little bit more or push the boundaries even further when it comes to be able to meet their budget means. And while the government back at the last budget gave a huge amount, gave a significant amount of money to support councils, we know that that funding was nowhere near enough. We know that we have an increase in population. We know that it is so vital that we keep public services going to a certain extent. It's not right that school children or the elderly should have their free buses taken away from them, especially school kids. You know, what you are doing is possibly denying the possibility of children being able to get to school because their parents can't afford to be able to take them to it for whatever reason. Then you'll be having false in the reason that either the parents will have to change their plans in order to take their child to school, or that basically they have to get a relative to do that, or there's a possibility that that child may miss out on their education altogether because they will not be able to get to school because they cannot afford to be able to pay for it, or it can pay for it, but it ends up digging into people's already hardships already when people are already struggling out there to pay their bills, as we know that bills are going up this year already on your water, energy, council tax, etc. We know all these bills are going up as it is. So just this possibility on top of that is taking us backwards. And while everybody's been recently talking about the situation that's been happening in Ukraine and what Keir Starmer has been as a global leader, here in the UK, here in England in particular, this is something that should never even be discussed. You know, the fact that this is even a possibility that this could even happen is absolutely disgraceful. You know, whatever you might think about our senior people, about where they voted, whatever they cast their votes or whatever, you know, they have worked all their lives. They've worked all their lives, and for me, like, it's not right that they should have to cough up their money to pay for bus fare. But the thing is that the government are not willing to plug the gaps here for the funding that is needed for councils. But when it comes to military, when it comes to increasing our defence budget or aid for Ukraine, it's all of a sudden the magic money tree appears out of nowhere. But when it comes to the needs of the British public, the money seems to go AWOL. So it really does paint this picture, doesn't it, about where the government's true loyalties lie. I've always said this before, and I've said this a million times, guys. When they say that they do not have money, the government, to afford things, they are lying to you. I cannot stress that enough. So free and cheaper bus travel for the elderly, school children and vulnerable groups is under threat due to a £450 million funding gap. Local councils are set to warn the government. On Wednesday, the Local Government Association will call on the government to plug the shortfall after the cash-strapped councils in England spent £452 million last year to meet the cost of the bus passes, which provide free services to older and disabled people. Councils have warned that they will be forced to cut free travel during peak times for the elderly, community transport services, school transport and reduce fares to meet the costs in future. Local authorities are legally obliged to provide bus passes to state pensioners and people with certain disabilities and reimburse bus operators for journeys made by those with a pass. However, discretionary bus services such as free peak travel, community transport services, and cap fares and school transports are already being scaled back by local authorities in order to balance the books. Adam Hugg, the transport spokesperson for LGA, said, "Free bus passes provide a vital lifeline for many in our community, allowing vulnerable residents to go shopping, visit family and friends, to attend appointments. Councils want to keep this scheme running, but cannot have having to find nearly £500 million a year from their own overstretched budgets to make up the shortfall. Money which instead could be used to help other people in need get to work or college. By using the spending review to plug this gap and give councils the long-term funding they need, we can help the government meet its own objectives of breaking down barriers to employment and opportunities while boasting inclusive economic growth. The LGA claims that £452 million funding gap is the difference between the funding councils receive from central government for the scheme compared to the actual number of journeys made over the past year. The lobbying group for councils is calling on Chancellor Rachel Reeves to use June's spending review to provide long-term consistent funding for local bus services and plug the gap in the scheme over the next 3 years. The LGA adds that the plugging the bus fare funding gap will provide better local public transport and support the government's aims to achieve economic growth and opportunity by encouraging more people into work, training and education, especially those less likely to have access to a car. This is also another thing, that's another, when they want to talk about growth, I've said this before and I said this again, the government cannot rely on private companies, businesses to do everything for them. The government has to put its hand in its pockets, and this is a situation here where the government needs to put its hands in its pockets. Last year, Labour replaced the £2 fare cap with a new cap of £3, claiming that the rise was unavoidable and the previous Tory government had not funded the continuation of the original policy. I said this at the time, like this was wrong. But again, this is another example of, in my opinion, and you can agree to disagree, they could have kept funding the £2 fare cap. But again, it's a political choice. Many councils and mayoral authorities such as Greater Manchester stepped in to retain the £2 cap by funding further subsidies themselves. The iPaper had previously revealed that millions of people in England have been left marooned as some councils have cut more than 90% of bus services since 2010. We have to remember that the austerity has made things very difficult for people over the last 15 years under the Conservatives. The loss of services mean that access to 10 worst affected areas, including Nottingham, Cumbria, Portsmouth, a combined 16 million miles of bus routes have been axed, with local leaders blaming cuts to central government funding. A DfT spokesperson said, "We fully recognise that free bus passes are vital to many and prevent loneliness, providing access to services and keeping people connected to their loved ones. We're already in the process of making ambitious reforms to the bus sector, including how funding is allocated. Our priority is to deliver long-term funding, certainty to local authorities and operations to improve services, increasing patronage and ensuring free passes are protected. And we are investing over £1 billion into bus services, which has meant that while we've been able to avoid a cliff edge of fare hikes and keep fares capped at £3 this year, while supporting local areas to improve services and reliability, and the ongoing spending review will assess the sector's future funding needs." So they're not saying that they will cover this. They're just saying we've invested this amount of money, and this is that kind of language. They're saying that we've invested this amount of money into services and what. This is the same rhetoric that you get from the Conservatives, and once again reinforces that messaging again when we talk, the reinforcing the message of red and blue doesn't matter, they're both the same. And the staunch Labour defenders here should be calling this out, saying like this is something that should not be even questioned. This should not be something that should be even questioned. This is the same concept when you apply into feeding children when it comes to making sure that they all have a full meal for their days at school. Ensuring that even not even non-days at school, kids should always be guaranteed a meal. Should always be guaranteed a meal, even if it comes from out of the state, even if it comes out of taxpayer money. I'm sure that taxpayers would have no problem paying for children to be fed. Like, surely you have no problem with our next generation of children if they cannot afford it to be able to be fed. Like, we want to make sure that our children have the best and brightest future possible, and we should be doing everything and anything to do that. And we are putting our children at a disadvantage here, potentially. School children at a disadvantage by axing this funding because they don't have the money to do so. This is very dangerous and very concerning indeed. It infuriates me that this is something that could happen. I'm not saying it will, but it could happen. It's taking us backwards when we're supposed to be going forwards. But what do you guys think? What do you guys make of this story about the free buses for elderly and school children could face the axe? And that's the word there, could. And I think that's really, really important to emphasise. Can the councils keep this going? Will they be able to? What do you guys honestly think? Let me know your thoughts on this story and more down in the comment section below. If you found this video informative or helpful to you, hit that like button, share across social media, subscribe if you haven't already. You join the YouTube membership for as little as 99p to financially support the work that I do here on this channel. And you can check out also additional content on Patreon and Rumble. Links are down below. So thank you all so much for watching, and I hope to catch you all very, very soon.